extra piece of information during this meditation retreat. This is a compilation from the Buddhist scriptures, really authentic, as far as we know, words of the Buddha. And I've used a text which was quite famous. It's over 130 or 40 years old. It's called The Word of the Buddha by Bodhinyana. And so it deserved a new translation, so I decided to retranslate it. I know my part, I don't just tell jokes, and I know exactly some of the reasons why we should make some translations and make these teachings even more alive. For those of you who've read any of the Buddhist scriptures, sometimes there's so many repetitions which I have removed, and there's such old language which I've tried to find new versions of old words so they become relevant to today's people. And I did, I think last year at Hua Hin, do some of the passages from this new translation. I'm not quite sure where I got up to, but I certainly never got to the real interesting parts, the right mindfulness and the right stillness, the last two factors of the Eightfold Path, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi. So because this is a meditation retreat, I thought that this is a good couple of factors to bring up. We only have 1 hour and maybe a little bit longer today, and also on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, so hopefully that just these two factors we can see what the Buddha said about them. So as we begin now, right mindfulness, what it means by right mindfulness as opposed to wrong mindfulness depends upon the context. Here in the context of the Eightfold Path is to get people enlightened. So we can see here the right mindfulness is specifically focused on 4 things. And I mentioned afterwards why it should be focused on those 4 things. It's not just mindfulness, it's where you put that mindfulness. If you, in the context of, say, playing soccer for Liverpool, your mindfulness should not be on the body or feelings, it should be on where the ball is and how to score a goal. So the different context means there's different focuses of mindfulness. So these 4 foundations of mindfulness, or sometimes we call them the 4 focuses of mindfulness. Okay. These 4 foundations of mindfulness. What is right mindfulness? This is a path leading in one direction to the purification of beings, to the surmounting of sorrow, lamentation, the disappearance of physical and mental suffering, the attainment of the true way to the realization of Nibbana, namely the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so first of all, you see here the translation, it's a path leading in one direction. I don't think this is the new translation, because straight away I see a mistake there which I took out. What are the 4 here? A bhikkhu, it is a meditator, and when it says he abides contemplating, what about the other half of the population? There are girls there as well. So was this the Adobe Reader version? Okay, this is an old version. See tomorrow if I can get a new version for you. But anyway, the path leading in one direction, it never ever means the only path. There are some, and I sometimes have to call them mischievous monks, who mistranslate this word just because they want to push their particular interpretation, but there's no way in the world that you can interpret the word ekayana as an only path. The only path to enlightenment is always the Eightfold Path. And that's consistent. It's a path leading in one direction. purification of beings, and that's the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? And I'm going to retranslate this as I go, because I know some of these are not the most modern translation. Here, a meditator abides contemplating the body, ardent, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. Sorry about this, we haven't got the correct translation here, but I have to retranslate it as I go. Here, a meditator abides contemplating the body, ardent, fully aware of the purpose and mindful, having restrained the five hindrances. They abide contemplating experience, this thing called Vedana, ardent, fully aware of the purpose and mindful, having restrained the five hindrances. One abides contemplating the mind, ardent, fully aware of the purpose and mindful, having restrained the five hindrances. And you abide contemplating mind objects, ardent, fully aware of the purpose and mindful, having restrained the five hindrances. This is like a summary of it. So here you see there's four objects which we are mindful of, and that is the body, the experience, Vedana, the mind and mind objects. Now the reason why that these four and nothing other than these four is simply because these are four things that a human being mistakenly assumes to be their self, their essence, their soul, their permanent being. It seems weird that people in a modern age that think that their body is themselves, but you wait until you go and see a doctor later on in your life, hopefully, and they say that you're about to die. How do you react to that? If you can really let it go, say, well, I expected this is the body's nature, then you will know you'd have understood that you focused on being mindful of the body to realize it's nothing to do with you at all. It's no more yours than your car belongs to you. It's just a vehicle you use for the time being. And eventually it will break down. It will have to be scrapped. So because people do identify with their body, by which they really get so attached to it, and they take it to be their possession, or at least they're sometimes even themselves. That is why we have to contemplate this to see it's nothing to do with us. And experience, Vedana doesn't mean the three types of experience. That's just one way of classifying it. You know, the happiness, suffering, or somewhere in between. This is speaking to experience, assuming that to be, my essence, who I am. My experience, and that is who I am. And the next one is the mind. This is a thing called the citta, and of course that's, as many people keep trying to figure out, usually just by thinking, by inference, by reason, which doesn't get you anywhere, what this mind actually is. And we take the mind to be the soul. And lastly, just the objects of the mind, which can include our thoughts, it can include our emotions, anything which becomes the object on the screen, on the TV screen of the mind. And we do these four foundations of mindfulness ardent, we really commit to it, fully aware of the purpose. In other words, we know why we're doing this. You always know that you can put effort in, what's the purpose of this? If you don't know what the purpose is, then sometimes one runs around in circles. Mindful, and most importantly, having restrained the five hindrances. Vinaya loke abhijadamanasa. And abhijadamanasa, the words which I have called here five hindrances, loke abhijadamanasa, that is a synonym for the first two hindrances. It's used in other suttas to replace the usual karma, chanda and vyapada. And this is actually what the commentaries to the Satipatthana Sutta say, and they have good ground, because you see that in the rest of the suttas, the words of the Buddha, sometimes you use one word, sometimes you use another word to describe the same thing. This does mean the 5 hindrances. So before you do the satipatthana, you're supposed to restrain the 5 hindrances. Not totally abandon them, but restrain them, through the right effort, which was happening before, and through the practice of right speech, action, the right livelihood, and also, of course, through the right intentions, the right motivations. The motivations of letting go, kindness and gentleness. So these are preparations so that when one comes to satipatthana, your 5 hindrances are actually decreased enormously. Now, contemplation of the body. How does a meditator abide contemplating the body? And there's several little examples here. And the first is the mindfulness of breathing. Here, a meditator gone to the wilderness. It doesn't mean forest. The word which monks keep on calling themselves forest monks, it's not forest monks. That's what reminds me of Forrest Gump, not the most wise and smartest of peoples. It doesn't mean forest, it means aranya is a word, it means not under the power of the government, unruled, the wild places. And that's what this means. In other words, gone to a secluded place, a quiet place. Could be mountains, could be deserts, any place which is not necessarily with a tree. Here, a meditator got to a quiet place, to the root of a tree. Why is it the root of a tree? Because you need some shade. To an empty place, sits down, having folded the legs crosswise, set his body straight, and this is my translation here, giving priority to establishing mindfulness. And I'll pause there. Sometimes that you hear the translation, establishing mindfulness in front of you. Now, if you ask, maybe your grandparents, where they exist, where you are, they'd always point to the heart. So they would think, in front of me must be putting mindfulness here somewhere. But because in the West we're so cerebral, and you've adopted that stupidity of thinking too much, it's our mistake, we really apologise. So we think we're in here somewhere, we're in our brain. So when you say in front of you, too many people say in front of you, where can that be? It has to be your nose. It doesn't mean the nose, it's not nose meditation or belly meditation. Putting something in front of you doesn't mean physical, it means giving it priority, putting it top of the list, making it first, making it in front. So the first thing we do is to establish mindfulness as a priority before anything else, before you even start watching the breath. And this is important because too many people, when they start meditating, they go to the breath straight away, and the only means by which they can hold the breath is through force, and that doesn't really work. Mindfulness is your first thing to establish. And when it's strong enough, then you can start watching your breath. So that's why you hear me say other monks, teachers will do something differently, do something similar. To get yourself mindful first of all, to settle you down, come into the present moment, stop thinking too much. Look at your peaceometer and just calm yourself down. Establish mindfulness. Mindfulness is the main thing. Awareness. Then once you have established mindfulness as a priority, then you can breathe in and out. And where it says breathe in and out knowing it's long, or breathe in and out knowing it's short, that is not you have to do one and then you have to do the other. It is alternatives. Just like the buffet you had for lunch, you didn't have to take everything from everything on offer. I hope not anyway, otherwise you get sick. You take your choice. So this is when you start watching the breath just enough to know whether it's short or long. Most of the time it's in between. It's average breath. And so instead of actually just knowing it's long or it's short, you can do something like counting the breath, breathing in one, breathing out one. Or you can do just breathing out in peace, breathing out, let go. These are all alternatives to these first two stages of mindfulness of breathing. And then I should experience the whole of the breath as I breathe in and out. As I mentioned, I think this morning, the whole of the breath from the very beginning to the very end. So it's not just going in, going out, it's in the very beginning of the in-breath. It's in the very end of the in-breath. The spaces between the in-breath and the out-breath. And this happens naturally as your awareness, your mindfulness gets stronger and stronger. You just see more things. And that's called the whole of the breath. I know that sometimes people say the whole body of breath. It never ever means that. It always means just the whole group of the breath. Just like you have a body of evidence, you have a body of soldiers. The word body, even in English, does not mean physical body. Sometimes it does, but it can mean all sorts of other things. And in this context, the Buddha specifically says it means just the whole of the breath, beginning to end. And lastly, you train to calm the bodily formation as you breathe in and out, which just happens quite naturally. The breath becomes very peaceful, very slow. The reason it does that, as I explained earlier, is because you're not doing very much. You're sitting still, you're not thinking or worrying about stuff. It means you're not needing so much oxygen to keep your body and mind going. Just like when your car is stuck in the traffic, you don't need so much petrol because the car's not going anywhere. Same way, you don't need so much oxygen, so the breath calms down by itself. So, next up. And, okay, this one I took out. So this is another thing which a skilled lathe operator or his apprentice, when making a long term. How many of you have ever operated a lathe? Not one of those electric lathes, but I did when we were in Thailand 42 years ago, where we had to make our own umbrellas, and what else do we have to make? Lots of stuff. But we used it on a wood lathe, where you just had a bamboo pole and a piece of rope on the end, and the other end of the one tied to the top of the pole, the other one tied to a treadle, and you wound the rope around whatever you wanted to carve, and as you push the treadle down, the piece of wood turned around. And so with a little sharp object, usually just a sharpened nail, you can actually carve the wood into nice round objects. That's when you did that type of lathe I've used, so I know what that metaphor means. Other people, that's just gobbledygook. But anyway, this is just for those four, just being able to observe your breath. In this way, you abide contemplating your own body, or you abide contemplating the body of others as the same as yours. You're not special. Unfortunately, you're not something missing in you. Fortunately, you're just an ordinary person. So just like other people's bodies, your body, you contemplate the body in its nature of arising, which is its causes, and elsewhere, it's probably later on here, but I'll just tell you what does this mean. arising, its causes, or you are contemplating the body and its nature and ceasing. So when the causes cease, so does the body. And it's explained the causes of the body's arising and maintaining is first of all food is the first cause of the body. You don't give it food, which includes water, it will die. And more interestingly, there is experience. Sometimes they just call it contact. If you deny the body experience, then it will also pass away. And this is, to me, it was interesting that when you have to, or you go, you have the privilege of seeing someone in the ICU and they're in a coma. If you don't touch their hands, stimulate their senses by talking to them, if they don't have any experience in the five senses, then the body will die. Even if the body is still viable, it does need that sensory stimulation, the experience, as a food to keep it going. That is one of the causes of the maintenance of the body, to experience. And the next one is will. Sometimes if a person doesn't want to live, you may have come across people who have lost the will to live and they die. So sometimes this happens too. The recent case I saw in the newspaper, people thought it was so romantic. I think it was in some old people's home in UK. Two people who were married for 60 or 70 years and they died together within a minute of one another, holding hands. So 60 or 70 years married together, one person died, and I don't know who was first, probably because it was England and they're very, they believe in etiquette in the UK, it's probably ladies first, and then the guy probably died afterwards, a few minutes. But it was really almost within minutes of one another. And how can that happen, except that person, there's no reason to live without that person, they don't want to live. They will themselves to die. And lastly, it's just consciousness. You need a mental consciousness as well for maintaining and keeping the body going. So that's what it means by the arising and passing away of the body. Why it comes to be, how it is supported. It comes from causes. When those causes disappear, so does the body. This is, again, classic Buddhist argument to notice that this body is out of control. It's not yours. You don't own it. It comes from external causes and will disappear when those causes vanish. So, or you by contemplating the body's nature both arising and ceasing, or else mindfulness that it is just a body is simply establishing them to the extent necessary for knowledge and mindfulness. Now here the mindfulness is used in another sense. This word sati is not always used to be aware of what's happening. It's also used to denote remembering the teachings, remembering the truth of things. It's not just mindfulness in the sense of knowing. It comes from a Sanskrit word called smrti, which is the same as memory. And it's one of the reasons why that often the Buddha described or defined mindfulness. Someone with strong mindfulness is someone who has a very strong memory, remembers things said and done a long time ago. So here, when it says extend necessary for knowledge and mindfulness, remembering that this is not my body, it just belongs to nature, not to me. It's just a body, that's all, not my body. And as long as you realize it's not your body, then of course you don't need to attach to it. So you abide independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a meditator abides contemplating the body, number one. Number two, the four postures. when walking, a meditator understands I'm walking, I'm standing, I'm lying down, or sitting, or however the body is disposed. So this is just, you're in the present moment, you know what you're doing. You're not in la-la land somewhere dreaming and not really wondering what you're supposed to be doing. You see that happen to people. They don't realize they're walking because they're thinking about the football or the government, and so they keep bumping into things. In this way, you're by contemplating again your own body, others' bodies, exactly the same, the causes of the body. Full comprehension of the purpose. Again, a meditator is one who acts in full comprehension of the purpose when going forward and returning. In other words, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of it? Acts in full comprehension of the purpose when looking ahead, looking away, when flexing, extending your limbs, when wearing your clothes. In the real translation it says clothes, not just robes, it's not just for monks. And carrying your stuff, I think I said, who acts in full comprehension of the purpose regarding eating, drinking, consuming food, tasting, defecating, urinating, walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, being awake, talking and keeping silent. We're supposed to be on silent retreat now. What's the purpose of that? So we understand why we're doing this. So, as I often say, this is Thailand. You may see a snake. And if you see a snake on the path, you don't keep noble silence. You tell your friends, look out, there's a snake on the path. And you don't try and do this miming. People will die. So the purpose of this is to try and keep everything calm and peaceful. So don't be stupid with noble silence. It is noble silence and it's stupid silence. Where you don't talk when there's fire. So please, if there's a fire, just say fire. So, okay, foulness of body parts. Now this is really terrible translation. Again, I think I can talk this out. I have to find a new translation tomorrow, sorry. Again, a meditator reviews the same body up from the soles of the feet down to the top of the head, just what's in this body, all the different parts. Now, of course, anyone who's a doctor here knows that there's lots of other stuff which we have now. This is called the 31 parts of the body, because the thing which is missing there, which is interesting, is the brain. In the time of the Buddha, the brain wasn't important. That's why people got easy to be enlightened in those days. But now the brain is so important, we give it so much focus. That's why people are not so much peaceful. And they say, just as there was a bag with an opening at both ends, full of grain. We don't know what grain is, rice, red rice. So what I did, so they have a shopping bag. And in the shopping bag, there is potatoes and baked beans and mushy peas, and I just put all the stuff I like. So it's just a bag full of stuff. And it said an opening at both ends, because you know what that means. And I took the whole thing out about elements, because being a physicist, it doesn't make any sense to me. You review the same body's made up of elements. And the charnel ground, this is just such an old one. Just seeing a body decompose in the different ways. And sometimes monks especially really get into this. See a corpse thrown aside, oozing, bloated, livid, being devoured by crows and worms. Then there's something which is very weird about this sort of stuff. In other words, it's just a body, that's all. They just go all the way through. Okay. Now, when I was first couple of years as a monk in Thailand, because it's in Thailand, you could actually go to see autopsies. And I don't know, sometimes people feel that's really scary. But I was really fascinated, with autopsies. Even when I was a kid, we used to have a TV program where they had only 5 or 10 minutes where they showed operations, only in black and white. And I loved seeing them. My mother, my father, and my brother had to leave the room. And when they wanted to turn it over to another channel, where there was something more interesting on, I'd always use my excuse, it's educational, Mum, it's educational. And that always convinced them to let me see my operations. Maybe I was a bit weird, but anyway, when I went to see my first autopsy, it was in Siriraj Hospital, just the other side from the old Grand Palace, the Sanam Law. And when I got there early. And because you're a monk, you can walk anywhere. So I walked into the lecture hall. And I couldn't believe this, but it's absolutely, honestly, 100% true. Now I was in the lecture hall, you got the bench there where they did the autopsies, and I saw that because it was a lecture hall, these seats, went up, and the lights were just these windows quite high up. And on one of those windows, there was, where you'd normally expect a flower pot, there was a plate on which was a head. And I thought, this must be just a joke. It can't be a real severed head, because that would be really gross. But of course, you went up there, picked it up, it was a real head. I don't know, whose head it was, but there it was in place of a flower pot. For me, wow, that was cool. It wasn't weird. That's gross. You can't get away with that these days. Just a severed head was on a plate. It was a real head. A real one. If you do autopsies all the time, you do get weird. But anyway, all those autopsies I went to, it never really affected me. And I asked some of the coroners and the pathologists who did autopsies every day, did that make you just, you're not really concerned about your body anymore? I said, no, not at all. So doing the, what you call the gross meditations, doesn't really help that much. I've never seen it really help someone in their meditation practice. So, anyway, that's my experience. Anyway, can you just scroll up a bit, please? Because they've got, for all of these ones, if you contemplate this thing we call the body, what it's made up of, how it works, you start to see what causes the body to exist. And it's just these 4 factors. And obviously the food, that would also include the air. It would also the experience. If we don't have any experience anymore, we become sort of housebound. We don't do much, then of course that's a cause of dying. I think in old people's homes, if you don't sort of make it enjoyable and fun, have music, have excursions, no experience means you're cutting off one of the important foods for a person to keep on surviving. And obviously the willpower, you want to keep on going. How many times have you had a loved one who's in the hospital, they're going to die any day, and they keep on living until the relations come from overseas. And as soon as they come from overseas, and they're ticked off their last son or daughter, they've arrived from New York, the next day they die. It's so common. Because the willpower is an important cause of survival. If you don't want to, then that's one of the causes which will cause the body to vanish. So, it doesn't belong to you. It's caused. Anyway, when mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, used as a vehicle, used as a basis, established, consolidated, well undertaken. Again, I took most of those out. It's just one of the anomalies, curiosities of Pali. It's like a thesaurus. Instead of just using one word, They use as many synonyms as possible. These 10 benefits may be expected. One becomes a conqueror of discontent and delight. Discontent and delight does not conquer you, especially just with regard to your body. Whether you're feeling healthy, you're not feeling so healthy. It's just the body, it's not my problem. One becomes a conqueror of fear and dread. Fear and dread do not conquer yourself. One abides on becoming fear and dread whenever it arises. So you're not afraid of dying, you're not afraid of injury, maybe afraid of pain, but not of dying, because it's only a body. One bears cold and heat, hunger and thirst, contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and creeping things. So because it's just the body. And also, interesting, ill-spoken, unwelcome words, and there isn't bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. Because it's not menacing to you, it's only menacing to your body. And because you can let go of your body, because it's not so important to you, then it's easy to get the jhanas. And because the body is not important to you and you get the jhanas, then you can get the powers. So I'm going to read this out because people feel psychic powers are cool. The various kinds of supernormal powers, having one, you can become many. And apparently there was a movie where, I think they had a Buddhist who was one of the advisors on that movie. And that's where I think somebody was, for one they became many. That was The Matrix, wasn't it? The Matrix? Don't ask me because I don't see those. So somebody, I think one of my friends said, yeah, they used that psychic power in The Matrix. As you go unhindered through a wall. Apparently, who did that? That was David Copperfield, went through the Great Wall of China, didn't he? And some of my monks said, oh, that guy must have had psychic powers. And one other guy said, don't you remember he was dating the supermodel Claudia Schiffer? Anyone who dates her will no longer have any psychic powers left. So we decided we didn't have psychic powers. Through an enclosure, through a mountain, as through space, he dives in and out of the earth as out of water. You walk on water without sinking as though we were earth. And that's a Jesus trick. I told the thing about Donald Trump joke, didn't I? When Donald Trump went to see the Pope recently, he asked the Pope, said, look, I've really got bad press. How can I be more respected, by the press? So the Pope said, I'll see what God can do for you. And God said, okay, I'll give you the ability to walk on water. So when Donald Trump returned to the White House, and there was a big protest outside the White House, as there usually is, he walked on that lake just by the Lincoln Memorial. And the next day, in the New York Times, Donald Trump, more incompetent than we thought. He can't even swim. So whatever you do, you can always turn it around. He's incompetent. He can't swim against the warm water. Anyway, sitting cross-legged, you travel in space like a bird, that's levitation. And yeah, there's lots of nice stories about levitation. There was, even recently, now this is in Burma. It's very hard to find really great monks in Thailand these days because it's been just too well developed. But one of my friends went into really up-country Burma where no one goes, and there was a famous monk there, and he became famous because there was a railway train, a train driver was driving his train, in the middle of nowhere, and a monk came out of the jungle and was right in front of the train, flying. And he followed, this train driver followed him, put down the accelerator, went as fast as he could. No matter how fast the train went, the monk was just ahead. And that gave him plenty of time to see who this monk was, and then the monk just started off into the jungle. That's really cool. And so after that monk became famous. But my most famous story about the monk who could levitate, and this is why we never show, if you can, you will never demonstrate it unless you're really stupid. because there was a monk living in the jungle, just a very nice monk, good meditator, didn't want for much in the world, and started to be able to levitate, to fly through the air. So he's flying through the air one morning. He used to go every morning for a little bit of exercise, and of course someone saw him. As soon as someone sees you, you're in big trouble. The word got around, a levitating monk. If you heard there was a levitating monk somewhere, would you go to see him? Yeah, of course you would. Not only you, but Channel 3 and Channel 7 and MediaCorp and CNN. And anyway, there was none of that in those days, but it got to the palace and the king said, I want to see this for myself. So send a few ministers up into the jungle to invite the monk to the city. And the monk said, no, I'm not interested in going to the city. I'm quite happy here. I don't need any of that sort of stuff. And so when the ministers came back and told him the monk had refused, the king sent a general and half the army to make him an offer he couldn't refuse. So this poor monk was dragged almost to the city, and the king was kind enough. He built a nice little forest in the palace grounds and put a hut in there. And interestingly, the late King of Thailand did the same in Chitlada Palace, because I went there once, because there was a monk I knew who stayed in there. In the grounds of Chitlada Palace, the late King Bhumibol built a little forest, and in that forest he built a hut. Apparently, he wanted to one day resign, to abdicate, and spend the last years of his life living in that hut. This was a nice, simple monk, a very noble idea, but never got to it. But so he invited other monks there, and one day, one of the monks who was staying there, Lupulia, he invited me to for lunch there, so I went into the palace and actually saw it. And His Majesty the King of Thailand tried to make it as much like a forest as possible, even got little forest chickens to be around there. So this is what that king did in the story. Made it just nice, and so the monk was just like a home from home, being in the city, but having his own personal forest, a nice simple hut. And the king would feed him, and any time he wanted some advice, he'd just go and see the monk. And so everything was working okay. And so the monk, every morning he would go for a quick spin around the palace grounds in the air, a little morning exercise, meditating. But one morning, as he was meditating and levitating around the palace grounds, that morning the king himself was too busy, so he sent the lunch, like the room service like I get. He sent the room service with one of his daughters, who was this drop-dead, gorgeous, haughty princess. And his poor monk, he was circling around in the air, levitating, and he saw this beautiful girl, and he had one moment of lust. Just one moment he lost his mindfulness. And as soon as he lost his mindfulness and had lust, he also lost his powers. And he did what we call crash landing. And after that, he realized how dangerous it was to be in a city with all its sensory delights. So he walked back straight after that breakfast. It took him 2 or 3 years to regain his powers to levitate. And he never ever again go into the city. So that's how sensitive these powers are. One moment of lust or ill will and you lose it all. Fascinating. So be careful. If you do manage to get some psychic powers and you can meditate, don't go too far off the ground and always wear a crash helmet just in case. And that's the usual psychic powers. Divine ear element, which is purifying the process the human one hears both kinds of sound divine, and those are the far as well as near. When I first went to Wabakon, there was a monk who could do that. He could hear the sounds of people a long way away. And I checked it out, it was real. This was a Wapapong. The market in Warin Shamar was about 6 or 8 kilometers away. And he could just listen out and hear real conversations happening. You know what happened with him? As soon as he got that psychic power, he became so proud and conceited, he thought he was enlightened. He actually went and sat in Ajahn Chah's chair. He said, I know more than you do. And, well, I saw him that after that, Ajahn Chah was a great teacher. He said, look, you're not enlightened, this is a psychic power, this happens, keep it quiet. And he bowed to every monk, including me, over in Wat Pah Pong, even though I was so junior. And then he left. I've never seen him again. Just disappeared. So that's sometimes what happens. You do get a psychic power, you can very easily think it's your attainment and get conceited. So that's why a lot of times that if you do get powers, you just vanish, disappear, hide it. One understands the mind of other beings, mind reading. I'll go through this because it comes up again later on. One recollects one's manifold past lives, and of course that is not that uncommon. Remember who you are, and where you've been, what your name was. So those are some of the powers which can happen. And divine eye and purify, you can understand the law of karma, how beings arise and pass away according to their karma. And lastly, the most important power, that you, with direct knowledge, you here and now enter upon and abides the deliverance of mind, deliverance by wisdom. This is enlightened experience. And I am summarizing this because that's what I do in the real translation, which I'll try and find for you tonight. That's contemplation of the body. Now, experience is a little bit more subtle. Why is it that we identify with experience? And we're so caught up in trying to get rid of unpleasant experience and only get pleasant experience. Which is, there's no way you can ever do that. You can't have pleasure without pain. You can't have pain without pleasure. You can't have night without day. That's why I said this is the Pure Land. But there's too much suffering to be a Pure Land. Even in heaven there has to be some suffering. If there wasn't any suffering in heaven, you wouldn't appreciate it. This is pretty good. Well, how we have it these days. But anyway, this is contemplation of experience. And how does a meditator abide contemplating experience? When feeling a pleasant experience, you understand it's pleasant. Feeling a painful experience, you find it painful. When feeling another painful or pleasant experience, I call that an intermediate one. Sometimes the words are too long. You understand, I feel just an intermediate experience. It's just like, a long breath and a short breath. What it really means is, you're experiencing something. Understand what this thing of experience actually is. And they do make a distinction here between worldly experiences and unworldly experiences. And the reason that the Buddha does this in the Satipatthana throughout the rest of his teachings, is the worldly pleasant experiences. They're ones which are really dangerous, causes attachments. But the unworldly pleasurable experiences, things like inspiration, the joy which you get with practicing kindness and compassion. Those are pleasures which the Buddha said, please attach to, develop, make much of. Don't throw them away. You get inspired, you get praise, you get some happiness coming up because your meditation is really going well. Don't throw that away, because that is the path which leads to freedom. So we have to distinguish between those pleasures which are just going to keep us in this world, and those pleasures which are going to uplift us, called the unworldly ones. It's worldly to worry about accumulating things. It's unworldly to give things away. How joyful and inspiring that is when you see somebody who actually does amazing acts of kindness and generosity, or an amazing act of forgiveness. They've really been hurt. They go up to somebody who's raped them and say, I forgive you. I really do. Let it go. I've let it go, you let it go as well. My torturer, my person who's hurt me. Those are things which inspire. And those sorts of pleasures lead you upwards and out of this world. That's why they're called unworldly. So the inspirational happiness is, please know which one is which, and follow the unworldly pleasures. So anyway, in this way you abide contemplating your own experiences, other people's experiences. You're not separate from them, you're the same as everybody else. You have your happiness and your suffering. And you can't think that, it's okay for Ajahn Brahm, he has no suffering. In this world, he doesn't know suffering. You can't really know suffering until you've delivered a baby. That is real suffering. What do you know about suffering and pain, Ajahn Brahm? We all have our own pain and suffering. As I often said, that if you are having a hard time as a lay person, you think you can't stand that suffering of just having families and having to get a job, so you decide to renounce and become a monk or a nun. It's true you won't have lay people suffering anymore. You'll have monk suffering or nun suffering. Still suffering, but different type of suffering. I always thought as a young monk, it was so tough as a young monk. When I become a senior monk, I won't have any suffering anymore. And it's true. You don't have young monks suffering. You have to do what the senior monks tell you to do. And you have to do all the hard work and clean their toilets. I don't have to clean my toilet anymore. That suffering is gone. I have the suffering of having all these monks asking me their questions and their problems, and having had my photograph taken and signing books. That's famous monk suffering. Whatever you do, you can't escape it. All it does is you change one form of suffering for another form of suffering. Those of you who are not married yet, you think you're looking for a partner, all you're ever doing, you're changing single person suffering for married suffering. And those of you who are married, you know what I'm talking about. And so, if you think, I've had enough of this guy, this girl, I'm going to divorce. It's true, you don't have marriage suffering anymore. You have single person suffering. That's all it is, changing one form of suffering to another form of suffering. So, the suffering you have is good enough. Don't think you can escape and get out of it by divorcing. There's one form of suffering for another form of suffering. I can't understand it, why it is that when people do get divorced or separated, they go and pair up again. They think, this time I'll get the right person. They're crazy, aren't you? Here we go again. Anyway, so this way, by contemplating your own experience, other people's experience, it's just experience, that's all. Or you abide contemplating the nature of arising, their causes, or the nature of their ceasing. Why does experience actually happen? And this is actually where the Buddha was saying the cause is, first of all, you have conscious apparatus, the sense of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and mind. The six senses, they're intact. Obviously, if you're blind or deaf, you can't sort of have those senses. You have the senses intact, and the sensory objects come into the field of view, and they come together, and they turn on consciousness, and then you have what we call experience. And a lot of it, ask any psychologist, is totally out of control, especially sound. Someone is noise, and you can't stop it. It's automatic. So even seeing, you don't choose to see, just the mind chooses for you. You look at objects which you think are really important. So even feeling my body, I've got an itchy nose. It'd be great if I can turn it off. I find, how can I turn off my nose feeling? You can do this through meditation, but you can't do it just at will. So this is your experience. If I could control my experience, I'd only have happiness. I'd never have tummy ache. I'll never have food I don't like. I'll never get sick and vomit like sometimes I do when I don't take the right food. I'll never have aches and pains. I will never have constipation. I will never ever get any sick. That is part of our life. There's nothing wrong with that. So this is experience. You see its causes, and when those causes vanish, only then does experience disappear. You can't have pain without pleasure, pleasure without pain. There's one interesting thing. If ever you're in pain, and you feel it's unendurable, please understand it has to pass. It can't last forever. It's impossible. After a while, people get used to chronic pain. It's just, things don't change. It doesn't become noticed. So don't be afraid of pain. It has to pass. Contemplation of the mind. How does a meditator contemplate the mind? Here, a meditator understands a mind affected by wanting, and there's a mind unaffected by wanting. First of all, that's the first thing I understand. Are you wanting something? So that's a very important part of your mindfulness when you're meditating. What do I want? If you can see that, if a mind is affected by wanting, you're going to get nowhere in the meditation, just more trouble. If you can let go of wanting, you can say, I don't want anything. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Understand a mind affected by aversion, which is another type of wanting, or wanting to get rid of stuff, or a mind which has no aversion. A mind affected by delusion, or a mind unaffected by delusion. That's a hard one, because you're deluded, you don't know whether you're deluded or not. So what it means here, the mindfulness of the past. You're mindful that you were deluded. That's the only way you can know it. Otherwise, you can't know you're deluded when you're deluded. A contracted mind, which is sloth and torpor, you understand you have sloth and torpor, you understand if you have restlessness and remorse. And the other ones, you understand a mind in jhana or mind not in jhana. In this way, you abide contemplating your own mind, other people's mind, it's just a state of the mind. Or you abide contemplating the mind in its nature of arising, or you abide contemplating the mind in its nature of ceasing. The causes of the mind to arise. And that is, they call that nama rupa, objects of the mind. If you don't have an object to be aware of, your mind turns off. It is so similar, these days is a very good simile, and that is your laptop, that is your tablet or your iPhone. If you don't use it, it turns off. If there's nothing on the screen, the mind vanishes. You have to have nama rupa. These are objects of the mind. The Buddha described it as two sheaves of reeds, or sheaves of wheat, which the farmers, when they reap, they take the rice and they dry the stalks to use as all sorts of things, but these are reeds, and they stack them up against each other to dry. You take one away, the other one falls down. You need two for it to happen. So you can't have any objects of the mind without a mind. You can't have a mind without the objects. The two cause one another. So the mind isn't always there. As soon as there's something to experience, it turns on. When there's nothing to experience, it turns off. This is called the arising and passing away. In other words, the mind is not always there. It's not permanent. It's not sort of just like a room waiting for you to go into it. When you're not in it, it disappears. You know, that's so much like quantum physics. Without an observer, the world doesn't exist. Contemplating the mind objects. How does a meditator contemplate mind objects? Got the 5 hindrances. You have to know whether you've got a hindrance or not. There being desire for the 5 senses. You know you have desire for the 5 senses. You are being ill will, aversion, you know there's ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, being doubt, you know those things are in you. How can that be? The whole point of the 5 hindrances is actually they distort reality. When you have desire, you see what you want to see, not what's there. When you have ill will, you only see the 2 bad bricks in the wall, you don't see the other 998 good bricks in the wall. When you fall in love, you see what you want to see in your partner. When you get divorced, you see only the 2 bad bricks. And you tell me, Ajahn Brahm, you've never been married, so you don't know. It's not 2 bad bricks, they're all bad. No way. And you have sloth and torpor. It's just the result of old karma. You're tired, you're exhausted. It's not you, it's just natural. Because you've been restless, wasting energy. Then the other hindrance. For also remorse. If you've got remorse, bad stuff you have done in the past, you keep thinking about it. It's another form of restlessness. So for goodness sake, forgive yourself. If you want absolution, you don't have to go to a Catholic church. I hereby absolve you all. I was trying to do the sign of the cross, but I forgot a long time ago. So anyway, you are totally absolved, the whole lot of you, forever. I'm a famous, powerful monk. Why can't I do that? The Pope does it. So I ask for equal rights. If he can forgive you, I can as well. So, and last one is like doubt. Doubt keeps you thinking. So, they have these, the 5 hindrances, they have these wonderful little similes. Suppose a person would take out a loan and undertake a business, and your business succeeds so you can repay all the money of the old loan. You'd be glad and full of joy. That's a simile for trying to find happiness through the 5 senses, sensory desire. It is borrowing happiness. You have to pay it back afterwards. Suppose a man were afflicted, suffering, and gravely ill, his food would not agree with him, and his body had no strength. But later he would recover. That's the simile of ill will, aversion. That you are sick. To be angry at someone else is being sick in the head. You are hurt yourself much more than you can ever hurt the person you're trying to make upset because you're angry with them. And when you actually forgive, it's like having a body, you regain your strength, you'll be glad, full of joy. Or suppose you're imprisoned in a jail, that's sloth and torpor. You can't do very much because the mind, they call it contracted. But once you've got rid of your sloth and torpor, you're free, you can do whatever you want. Suppose a man were a slave, not self-dependent but dependent upon others. That's when you have thoughts, restlessness. You are a slave to thinking. The thinking owns you. It's not my thoughts. The thoughts are actually ones which enslave you. Or suppose a person with wealth and property were to enter a road across a desert, but later you would cross over the desert safe and secure with no loss to your property. In other words, your doubt, is this the right way? Is this Ajahn Brahm the best teacher? Is this path the real correct one? Every other monk says they got the right answer, but they always say different things. Who can I trust? That's doubt. But once you've crossed over, you realise, actually this is true. That's one hindrance has gone. I think tomorrow maybe talk more about the 5 hindrances. Or actually, that probably finish there for today because it's 5 o'clock. And that's an example that's coming on to the fourth Satipatthana, so we've got quite a long way, but I did abbreviate them, and I see if I can find the modern translation so that you can actually, tomorrow, you can actually compare a little bit, just how a modern translation is far more powerful and not so misleading. But that is enough for today. This is the Satipatthana, right mindfulness. And to sum up, the four Satipatthanas: body, experience, the mind objects. And the reason why we do these things is because this is important for your liberation, to realize that all of these things, it's not you don't own them, it's not the source of your essential permanent self. So once you see they're all caused, and when the causes go, these disappear as well. They can't be you. And that would mean you can let them go and be free and not so worried. It's you, you're not special, everyone is the same. It's called life. And when you do that, you can be liberated and free.